Now, this is Progressive Soup, and I have Nina Mohajer as my guest. I'm David Stevenson, and on our first show, we had a lot of questions to talk about, but instead we ended up finding Buddha. So let's stick with Buddha for a couple more minutes.
Sure.
You mentioned about the hands, the 8 hands, and what they represent. Generally, what do they represent? Who is this Buddha guy?
For me, generally, I think Buddhism is more a spirituality than a religion.
Or is it a Buddha guy?
It is a guy from the history books I've read so far. It was a prince, as mentioned before, who discovered with all his wealth and his beauty and everything he had that there is an opposite side, which is maybe explainable to the yin-yang we have. So there is never a beautiful thing without the ugliness, never a white.
That's the white and the black.
Exactly, never a white without the black. So basically that this balance should be there, and that makes human beings human beings. For me personally, it helped me to find my inner balance. And stepping back a little bit, I can tell you how I found Buddhism. It was right after September 11th, where I wanted to discover why people do the things they do, because it really harmed everybody. September 11th was not only something which happened politically or killed a lot of innocent people.
Right,
and
when Saddam Hussein flew an airplane into the World Trade Center.
Exactly. So it's not only that.
Just kidding. Just kidding. That's what some of our other folks on the other shows on Comcast seem to believe. But we're going to debunk that right now.
And I slipped right into your joke.
It was not Saddam Hussein. It was his twin brother.
So anyway, are you okay?
Go ahead.
So anyways, I found it as a personal...
Yeah, go ahead.
As a personal point for myself to discover a lot of things about religion, about different paths, which again leads to women's rights as well.
Yeah.
On that path to women's rights, it's not like from one day to another I found about the status of women.
Yeah.
So towards Buddhism, I like the fact that Buddhism explains a lot about yourself. Basically, you cannot do good deeds in this world without first reaching your own nirvana, without first reaching this inner balance. And you have to accept your positive and your negative. Like, I don't know whether you probably know some things about marketing, the SWOT analysis marketers do when they're developing a new product.
I might know a little bit about that.
Strength and weaknesses, opportunities and threats.
Yeah.
And so Buddhism for me is the strength, weaknesses. So to accept your own strength and weaknesses, to accept your good and bad, in order to accept yourself as a human being, and then step up and help others and deal with others. So those 8 hands of Buddha, which are not really called the 8 hands of Buddha, but they represent, every one of them represents something different. If you look at Buddha statues, a lot of them have a little jar in their hand, which I was told is supposed to show the healing of the world, basically medicine of the world. Which one I like the best is when the Buddha is standing or sometimes sitting, having one hand up, one hand down.
Yeah.
Saying basically whatever you do with one hand, the world is going to see it on the other side, which has a very deep, deep meaning to me. And looking at Buddhism, I found a lot of similarities or a lot of sources of the other religions in Buddhism. And that's why, again, when we go back to the differences, like what we said about the different cultures and boundaries we set ourselves, it's the same way, David, with the religions. People concentrate way too much. If you look at a person who is sitting in a Buddhist temple, if you look at another person praying in an Islamic mosque, at one person praying in a church, or one person praying in a Jewish temple, they're all praying. You know? So for me, setting a boundary again, setting a limit, maybe maybe I'm too spiritual in this point, maybe I'm too freedom-loving, or as Republicans would call me, a freedom-loving, tree-hugging Democrat liberal, which I was called, by the way, during the Board of Ed campaign I was running. So for me, those are all boundaries.
And did you admit it or no? I mean, you must have admitted it. I mean, you are one of those, aren't you?
I am, and I take it absolutely as a compliment. I absolutely take it as a compliment. And I think if more people would start slowly looking at everything we have in common, and accept, as Elie Wiesel was actually saying in one of the graduation ceremonies just this past Sunday, a friend of mine was telling me that he mentioned, and please correct me if my quoting is wrong, accept others in their otherness. And I think these are just a few words, but they really bring it down to the basic. And you know, you can transfer it again, since our topic is supposed to be the status of women.
We'll get there, we'll get there. But before we get there,
yes, sure.
Before we get there, I want to know, since we're talking about the status of women, I want to know for a fact that I've heard a rumor, and I think it's true, that Buddha is really a woman.
I had never heard of this.
No, really?
No, I had never heard of that.
Well, if the status of woman is equal, then for every male Buddha, there has to be a female Buddha.
Probably. Okay. You're right. I never thought of it that way.
And since there's this equality in nature, there has to be one to balance the other. Male to balance the female, good behavior, not good behavior, but bad behavior, but good qualities, bad qualities. So there has to be.
You're right.
You admit. You will agree.
I never thought about it this way. And if you look closer at the Buddha statues, it's really unisex. You can never see the male traits of the face, the very masculine face. You can see a little femininity, so maybe it's done on purpose. That's funny, but something to talk about, definitely.
So now, okay, back to the status of women. You know what? Let's go back. I want to go numerically, just for once on this show. I want to go numerically the way the questions are actually written in order, just for the heck of it. Does the knowledge of the languages, and I'm presuming that means Farsi and German and English, or Ridgefieldian as we call it, does the knowledge of the language give you a certain connection to any of these specific 3 countries?
Absolutely. I was one of those lucky ones who never had to struggle with any language. And to this I really owe a lot to my parents, because both of them, when they came into Germany, they had to learn German being one of the toughest languages. They really had to learn it from scratch. And my mom struggled a lot with it. She was this petite woman coming to Germany, where at that time everybody was still tall and blonde. And she said she was scared of them.
So she did not fit the mold at all.
At all. And she was seen like a little Middle Eastern doll, in a way. She was at that time very young, very petite. And she says she really struggled with it, and she felt German people are very harsh because of the harsh language. Even the nice...
Oh, it is a very harsh language. It's all
and you see, I don't notice
very
this.
Guttural and very, oh my God, it's nothing like French
or Italian,
which
yes,
are
absolutely.
Beautiful flowing languages. The poor Germans, they get stuck with this
We don't notice it. We don't notice it at all, obviously. So my parents had to struggle with that. The father of my kids, when he came into America, he had to struggle with the English. And
it's a tough language. It's an easy one to struggle with because it's a tough language.
Exactly, and nobody really realizes, while English speaking might be easy, that English is one of the richest languages, and I'm always stuck on the word enough, how it's written and how it's pronounced. To this day, I'm still amazed by how you can write a word this way and pronounce it that way. Do you know what I mean?
The R-O-U-G-H.
Exactly. So how to pronounce it that way. And so I can absolutely understand that he struggled with that. So I didn't never have that struggle. And no matter which country I went to,
you must be the Buddha then, if you have never had struggle with any languages.
So it gave me an opportunity of better understanding the culture. Yep. Because I go back again to the sample I told you before. When you speak to a man in a language he understands, you speak to his head. But when you speak to him in a language which is his language, you speak really to his heart. So people embraced me differently when they noticed I do speak their language. Or if words were missing, for example, when I moved to the US, when words were missing here and there, they embraced that and they noticed how much I'm trying to speak it to the same level.
They cherish the difference and they cherish the effort you're putting into speaking a language, which for Americans is a tough language.
Exactly.
I mean, we have a gosh darn tootin' tough time with this here language.
Exactly. So I never had the struggle which a lot of people are facing, and which explains why during the campaign, as you know, I was the first Iranian American to run here in the state of Connecticut, which gives me a lot of pride to myself.
Board of Education in Richfield.
Exactly, Board of Education in Richfield.
And what better person to run for the Board of Education seat than someone that speaks 3 languages?
Actually, I have to brag, I speak 6 languages.
Which are?
Well, Persian, which is always mistakenly said as Farsi, but you shouldn't say that. German, I was raised bilingual. Then English, French, I speak Italian, and I had Latin at school. And I'm in the process of learning Arabic. So
braggart.
Yes, I had to show off. So one of the main aspects in which I was known for is the foreign languages. I try to push it through, and I received a lot of emails from a lot of concerned residents in town that they were really, really extremely happy and satisfied with this effort I had put in this. Even though I can only...
And how do you say braggart in Persian? Is there a word?
Pozmiat.
Pozmiat?
Pozmiat.
Pozmiat.
Yeah, and angeben in German.
Yeah, and then is there a word for braggart in Latin?
I would know. Latin is not really a language you speak. Latin enables you to memorize things in real property law. You know, all the different terms and everything. So in the legal studies it helps you, and it definitely helped me seeing the, again, going back to the, we should have called the show Common Denominator because of all the things French and Italian and Spanish have. I understand Spanish when I read it.
Now, how does Germany end up being? You know, it's not that far away from these other countries. It's close to France, and it's got that little place called Switzerland in between, which I'm not really sure what. I'm not really sure who they are, but and it's kind of close to all these countries that speak these lovely flowing Romance languages that just tear your heart out and make you smile, and then the Germans get stuck with this.
Well, if you think German is harsh, you should listen to Swedish or Finnish people speaking. Because the further north you go, I think people...
It's the cold then.
Yes, and somebody once told me, I don't know whether it might have been you, that the more you go towards the north, because people are freezing or colder, they speak faster, they act faster.
As a matter of fact, I think that might have been me that said that. As a matter of fact, I think I'll take a little credit for that. Thank you. And now there's another language which is really harsh, maybe even harsher than German, Korean.
That's what I heard.
And North Korea is as the Spanish would say, infierno. It's hell. It is. It's cold there on the 4th of July, I think.
But you know that Korean is a mixed language which developed itself after, I think, a certain time period in their history. I have a Korean neighbor, and they explained it a little bit to me.
Okay.
And so it is a made-up language, actually. It is really a mixture of different languages. And if you look at all the Asian languages and compare the signs, theirs is completely different. Chinese and Japanese, if you know the difference between them, Japanese is more flowing, is softer, the writing. Chinese is more boxed, but very fine and very detailed. If you look at Korean, it's really harsh, also the writing.
I could visualize the Korean writings because I've seen it on calendars, for example, in nail salons and whatnot. Not that I go to nail salons, but I've seen them in nail salons.
Yeah.
And it is very peculiar, not peculiar, but it's very different looking than Chinese or Japanese, and it sort of parallels the language in that the writing is kind of harsh looking.
Exactly. So it's those differences in the languages.
Now, what's that thing about the about the further north you go, you speak faster, and the further south you go. Even in our own country, United States, you go south, and everybody, they talk real.
They drag the words
slow.
really. That's true.
Real slow, because it's so darn hot that you can't speak quickly, like maybe with the north.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely true. Absolutely.
So we're a little bit more high-strung here in the north, I guess.
I guess so.
Because you have to be when it's cold. You have to
speak faster to warm up yourself.
Exactly, and move a lot. Now there are countries where they use their hands more in define. Italian.
Italian, Persians.
What what's behind that? I mean, why do Italians? Oh, and Persian also?
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of hand signals and whatnot?
Absolutely. I actually, regardless of the fact that I was not even raised in Iran, I still talk with my hands a lot, and during business meetings, I always have to concentrate keeping my hands down and not looking like an Italian market lady dragging with the hands around. I think it's emotions. It goes back to the cultural point of being very emotional. Persian people, and I always use myself first as a sample to understand other people.
Certainly, yeah. That's a point of reference, yeah.
Exactly. If I had to, for example, say what part of me is really Persian, I would say me being very emotional. And that explains also talking with the hands. You know? So you exaggerate things in the Persian language, and the same with the Italian probably. You try to empathize not only with the words, but also with the body language.
Or you frame the conversation, you phrase the dialogue by being more animated when you want to make it sound, instead of raising the volume of your voice,
exactly.
You do a little of this.
True.
Now, it could possibly be in Italy, for example, that when they go like this, it's hot. Sicily is a hot place. They're really sort of fanning themselves. It serves a little different purpose than the hand language in the northern part of Italy.
I like that explanation. So I already learned two things, and I thought I'm already very bicultural and everything, but I learned two things.
I'm going to make you wait a second.
Quattro?
Dodecacultural. Is that 12 or is that 20?
Yeah, the quattro is 4.
Yeah, but dodeca is like a dodecagon.
Yeah.
Is that the 12-sided one?
Yes.
Okay.
Dodici.
Oh, okay.
Dodici.
For what?
Dodici is 12 in Italian.
Dodici.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I have to tell people every once in a while. It's sono italiano de Betel.
Oh, okay.
That's my shtick with the Italian language. That's all I say in Italian, other than a very few other words. But you'll have to teach me how to say. How do you say, "I'm Persian from Bethel"?
In Farsi?
Sure.
Man Irani hastam az Bethel.
Man Irani hastan
az Bethel.
Wait a second. Gosh. 10 minutes. Oh, okay, thanks. I thought it was giving me 5P signals.
So no, man Irani
hastam
az Bethel.
As Bethel?
Yes. Very good.
Man Irani hastan as Bethel?
Exactly. Very good. Very good. I'll learn you some Persian.
I speak Persian. So, hey.
As you know, my children are trilingual. They were raised trilingual.
And they don't quite measure up to mom yet, huh?
No, well, they learned French. They started learning French at school now, so they're picking up with the fourth.
Well, mom always wants to be able to speak more languages than her children, so she can brag about it.
No, actually, I try to encourage them to learn more than I do, more languages and also different ones. So no matter where we get stuck in an airport, one of us can get the way out.
So every airport has an interpreter.
Exactly, exactly.
How are your girls different from you? I mean, how you mentioned a little bit in the first show about how they don't accept certain types of discussions that are old school, old world. Can you say much more about how they view the world differently than you do?
Absolutely. They embrace the women's rights, for example, going back to the main topic. They embrace women's rights in a completely different manner. My mom's generation in the 1960s, 70s, they really had to fight for their rights. my mother living in Iran, in Germany, coming out, being the first woman out of her country to leave the country. So they had to fight for it. My generation, I always feel, and you're going to laugh, I always feel like the sausage in between the bun, basically, because my mother's generation, my mother's generation giving me so much pressure, these are the women's rights we fought for, you better take advantage of it. So I was raised with the image of, okay, a woman has to embrace all the women's rights the previous generation
Well, they
had
better,
fought
because
for.
their moms and their grandmoms fought for them.
Exactly. Otherwise, you are going to end up like your grandmother, sitting home, giving birth to children, waiting for the husband to come home in the evening and say, oh, here's your martini, darling. You don't want to live like that, like the 1950s. So,
well, some of us might. Some of us might be okay with that kind of thing, right?
So my generation, we had to really live up to that, to this image.
Yeah.
Now, my children are born in this world where global economy is already a big talk. They are grown in this world of Facebook and Twitter, where they can connect to the whole world. They are being raised in a world where voting rights for women is not an issue in the world they know.
They take it for granted.
They take everything for granted.
But they do probably remember. They probably have been taught where it came from and who struggled to get them what they have.
You know, I took them recently, as you know, I'm in the board of directors of the League of Women Voters.
Yes.
So there was a Susan B. Anthony presentation, and I took them there hoping that they see the development. And a lot of young women who were there, very young women, like below 25,
yeah,
they left because they didn't get that connection. Now, I did not necessarily have to fight for my rights either, but I had been told, again, my generation, we were told constantly by our mothers, we were the ones burning the bras, so you basically embrace this, that you have these rights.
Now, what I always heard from my parents was how they walked 20 miles to school and 20 miles home every day, and that, of course, was, you know, sometimes in horrible snowstorms. And I think that was maybe in Miami, Florida, they talked about that happening. But yeah, I think parents sometimes tend to exaggerate a little bit what their accomplishments were. And but what kids that have grown up recently that have all these great steps taken to further humanity, what can they do? Are they doomed to being the generation that there's nothing left to accomplish?
I wouldn't say that. I think we set all the stones. Like our parents had the fight, we set the stones, and it's up to the next generation, the Generation Y, to build it all up, to bring finally, it might be too dreamy to say, bring the peace among the world, because I don't want to put too much pressure on those children's, obviously, or that generation's shoulder. But they had the best footwork set already for bringing finally this peace, because they do not see country boundaries as much as our generation saw. Again, going back to the internet technology.
Yes.
To technology and seeing this connection from everywhere, having friends everywhere, growing up with different languages, growing up with different cultures, not having the issue with race issues or religious issues that much, embracing each other the way they are. So it's among them now to finally put all those pieces together. While the one generation had the fight, the other one, my generation being the sausage in between, we hand over the fire basically to them, saying, okay, now we set up everything for you.
Maybe their job is to fill in the mortar. And the mortar,
or that.
and the building's been built, and they need to fill in and maybe perhaps maintain that mortar to make sure that there's no degradation of the building.
Exactly.
So that at the very least, what the generations prior to them have accomplished stays in place.
Exactly. And you know, I have to give you a good sample. There are sometimes international day schools or heritage days at school.
Yeah.
I always get obviously invited, and I always get the option to choose whether I want to talk about the immigration. My last name being Mohajer, I always use it as a joke because it means an Arabic immigrant. So,
Does it?
and my family has been immigrating ever since, from one town to the next, or from one country to the next.
So it's sort of like Ishmael. In the Bible, Ishmael is the wanderer.
Exactly.
Who never finds, and of course that transfers over, of course, to the great American novel Moby Dick.
Exactly.
Call me Ishmael.
Exactly. So I never one place and always being an immigrant. And when I go in, at the very first time I went in, I was a little nervous, I admit. I thought, okay, these girls are going to hear probably from their parents that Iran is the country after the revolution. Germany is associated with the country of World War II. So how am I going to bring it across? But I noticed these children really embraced the fact that I came from different places, and they were fascinated because they had never thought of anybody, or me in particular, being different than any one of them or any of their mothers. They were fascinated. So see, so I saw at that point all the balance again. You know, like, okay,
it always comes back to balance, doesn't it?
Exactly.
We talked about in both shows of the yin and the yang, the idea of Buddha and the good points and bad points about all of us, and it always comes back to balance, and of course it always comes back to Progressive Soup and the balance here, which our objective is to find common ground.
Exactly. Exactly. So.
Wait, I think I have one more question here. Hold on. Again, knowing how the two of us can talk forever, please have surprise questions. Oh, I think that was your direction rather than a question. Which culture did you teach your children, and what traditions do you follow at home? We've got 2 minutes.
Sure. Culture-wise?
1 minute.
Okay, culture-wise, I taught them everything the best out of each culture, of the Iranian one, of the American one, and of the American one. We celebrate, and my friends know it already, they laugh about it. Anything what is there to celebrate, I just celebrate in my house.
And that's Progressive Soup, and we've had a second visit with Nina Muhajir through the miracle of staying in the same seats for another 30 minutes. Good night, it's Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson, and I might be back next week. Who knows? Good night. So now we pretend to talk like...